At 1:50 a.m. on May 24, 1944, soundman Second Class John Prock pressed his headphones closely against his ears, listening to the ocean 300 feet beneath USS England. The destroyer escort gently rocked in the darkness north of the Admiralty Islands. Prock had been monitoring submarines for 6 continuous hours. His back was sore, his head pounded. The coffee had turned cold 2 hours prior. Through the hydrophones, he detected something, a faint mechanical drone, propeller cavitation, the unmistakable sound of a submarine trying to evade capture. Row 116, the 4th Japanese submarine they had pursued in 5 days. Prock knew what was about to occur. He had witnessed it 3 times already. The Hedgehog mortars would be fired. 24 projectiles would soar through the night and dive into the Pacific. If they struck, there would be explosions, wreckage, oil, bodies. If they missed, the submarine would evade capture, and the pursuit would recommence. But this occasion was different. This submarine was retaliating. The Japanese commander was executing maneuvers Prock had never encountered, zigzagging, rapid depth changes, counter-pinging to confuse the sonar, every tactic intended to break contact and disappear into the dark waters. Prock had to maintain that contact. His ship, his crew, Lieutenant Williamson standing behind him on the bridge, all relied on the sounds coming through his headphones. What transpired in the next 20 minutes would decide whether USS England continued her unprecedented killing spree, or whether Row 116 became the submarine that got away. However, no one on USS England realized they were already making history. No one knew that Japanese submarines were being destroyed faster than ever before. No one knew that in 12 days, this small, unassuming destroyer escort would achieve something no other ship in naval warfare had ever accomplished. The issue was that American anti-submarine warfare was not functioning effectively enough. Japanese submarines posed a threat to Allied operations throughout the Pacific. The I-class submarines were large, capable vessels, displacing 2,500 tons, surfaced. They carried crews of over 100 men and could operate for 90 days without resupply. Armed with 6 torpedo tubes and a 5-inch deck gun, they were formidable weapons. The Roe-class submarines were smaller but highly effective in coastal waters. These boats displaced between 600 and 800 tons and carried crews of 40 to 60 men. They were designed for shorter-range patrols and coastal defense operations. Both types operated throughout the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and the Central Pacific. They intercepted convoys, reported Allied fleet movements, and delivered supplies to bypass Japanese garrisons. Japanese submarine doctrine emphasized reconnaissance and fleet support rather than commerce raiding. Submarines were expected to scout ahead of the combined fleet, report enemy positions, and attack capital ships when opportunities arose. This doctrine made Japanese submarines valuable strategic assets, but also made their loss particularly damaging to Japanese naval operations. American forces had tools to combat them. Sonar could detect submarines underwater. The QC and QGB sonar systems used by American destroyers and destroyer escorts could detect submarines at ranges up to 5,000 yards under favorable conditions. Radar could spot them on the surface. The SG surface search radar installed on most destroyer escorts could detect a surface submarine at ranges of 8 to 10 miles. Depth charges could destroy them. The Mark 9 depth charge carried 300 pounds of TNT and could be set to detonate at depths ranging from 50 to 600 feet. But the tools were insufficient. The fundamental issue was time. When a destroyer or destroyer escort detected a submarine with sonar, the vessel had to accelerate and run directly over the submarine's position to drop depth charges off the stern. That created a blind spot. At close range, sonar could not maintain contact because the returning echo merged with the outgoing pulse. The physics of sonar detection meant that as the range closed below about 200 yards, the time between the transmitted pulse and the returning echo became too short for the equipment to distinguish. The submarine disappeared from sonar at exactly the moment when the attacking ship needed precise targeting information. This blind spot typically lasted 40 to 60 seconds, sometimes longer. During that time, the submarine could change course, change depth, or change speed. A submarine running at 8 knots could travel 260 yards in 60 seconds. That meant the submarine could be anywhere within a circle 500 yards in diameter by the time the depth charges exploded. By the time the depth charges exploded, the submarine was somewhere else. The statistics proved it. In early 1942, American depth charge attacks achieved a kill rate of approximately 3%. That meant 97 out of every 100 attacks failed. The submarines escaped. They survived to attack another convoy, report another fleet movement, deliver another load of supplies to Japanese troops. By 1944, the kill rate had improved to 20 to 30% through better tactics, improved depth charge patterns, and more experienced crews. But that still meant most attacks failed. American destroyer escort crews knew the problem intimately. Ships made multiple attacks on the same submarine, dropping dozens of depth charges with no result. The submarine would vanish, only to be detected again miles away or escape completely. Individual attacks sometimes involved 30 or more depth charges dropped in carefully calculated patterns. Each attack disrupted sonar contact for 20 to 40 minutes while the water settled. During that time, the submarine could escape. Captains knew their weapons could not reliably hit what their sonar could not continuously track. The weapon that changed anti-submarine warfare was called the Hedgehog. It was developed by the British Royal Navy in 1941 and adopted by the United States Navy in 1942. The development came from British experience in the Battle of the Atlantic. British naval officers recognized that the blind spot problem was killing their effectiveness against German U-boats. The Royal Navy Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, working with engineers from the Ministry of Supply, began developing a forward-throwing weapon in early 1941. The first prototype tests occurred in June 1941. Initial designs used a single large mortar, but testing showed that multiple smaller projectiles would be more effective. The final design used 24 spigot mortars arranged in 4 rows. The prospective name came from the appearance of the launcher. 24 spigots arranged in rows that resembled the spines on a hedgehog's back. Each spigot fired a single projectile 7.2 inches in diameter, 65 pounds total weight, 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Torpex was a British-developed explosive compound consisting of 42% RDX, 40% TNT, and 18% powdered aluminum. It was approximately 50% more powerful than TNT alone. The projectiles fired forward, not backward like depth charges. They launched ahead of the attacking ship in an elliptical pattern. The Mk-10 launcher, which was the type installed on USS England, had a range of 283 yards and created an elliptical pattern approximately 195 feet by 168 feet. The Mark 11 launcher had a range of 267 yards. The projectiles entered the water nose first, sank at about 23 feet per second, and exploded only on contact with a solid object. The contact fuse required approximately 20 pounds of pressure to detonate. If the projectiles missed the submarine, they did not explode. They just hit the ocean floor and went silent. That was revolutionary. Depth charges exploded whether they hit anything or not. The explosions created turbulence and noise that destroyed sonar contact for 30 minutes or more. The pressure waves from the explosions created thermal layers in the water that disrupted sonar propagation. You could not tell if you had killed the submarine or just made a lot of noise. With Hedgehog, silence meant a miss. Explosions meant hits. If you heard detonations, you had hit the submarine. If you heard nothing, you had missed and could immediately reattack without waiting for the water to clear. The second advantage was the forward firing arc. The Hedgehog fired ahead of the ship while the submarine was still in sonar contact. The attacking ship could track the submarine continuously until the moment the projectiles entered the water. No blind spot, no guessing. The sonar operator could see exactly where the submarine was and adjust the aim accordingly. The ship maintained sonar contact throughout the attack run, tracking the submarine's movements up to the moment of firing. This allowed the attacking ship to compensate for last-second course changes or depth adjustments. The third advantage was lethality. A depth charge had to explode within about 25 feet of a submarine to cause fatal damage. The pressure wave from a depth charge explosion could rupture hull plates, damage machinery, and flood compartments, but only if the charge exploded close enough. A Hedgehog projectile had to physically hit the submarine to explode. When it hit, it exploded against the hull. 35 pounds of Torpex detonating against metal meant penetration. The explosive force was concentrated at the point of contact rather than dispersed through the water. One hit could rupture the pressure hull. 2 or 3 hits guaranteed a kill. The statistics proved it. In the Atlantic theater during 1943 and 1944, British ships using Hedgehog achieved a kill rate of approximately 18%. That was 6 times better than early war depth charges. By the end of the war, Hedgehog-equipped ships were responsible for over 50 confirmed U-boat kills. American ships in the Pacific achieved similar results, but most destroyer escorts did not have Hedgehog yet. The weapon was new. Production was limited. Only the newest ships got them during construction. As of May 1944, fewer than 50 American destroyer escorts in the Pacific carried Hedgehog launchers. USS England was one of the fortunate ones. She was a Buckley-class destroyer escort, hull number DE-635. Commissioned on December 10, 1943, at the Bethlehem Steel Shipyard in San Francisco, she displaced 1 400 tons light, 1,740 tons full load, length 306 feet, beam 37 feet. Draft varied from 9 feet 5 inches light to 13 feet 6 inches full load. Powered by 2 steam turbines, generating 12,000 shaft horsepower through electric drive. The turbo-electric drive system was unusual for ships of this size, but provided excellent maneuverability and precise speed control. These characteristics proved valuable during anti-submarine operations where precise positioning was critical. Top speed 24 knots, range 6,000 nautical miles at 12 knots. Crew complement 186 men. Armament was modest compared to fleet destroyers. 3 3-inch 50 caliber dual-purpose guns in open mounts, 1 forward, 2 aft, 8 to 9 20mm anti-aircraft guns, 3 21-inch torpedo tubes. But the real weapons were the anti-submarine systems. 1 Hedgehog launcher forward with 144 projectiles. 8 K-gun depth charge projectors. 2 stern racks for rolling depth charges. Total load 200 depth charges. QHB sonar system for underwater detection. SG surface search radar. The ship was named after Ensign John Charles England. He was born in Harris, Missouri on December 11, 1920. He studied drama at Pasadena City College from 1938 to 1940. He enlisted in the United States Navy on September 6, 1940. He completed training on USS New York from November to December 1940, then attended Naval Reserve Midshipman School. He was commissioned as an ensign on June 6, 1941, and assigned to USS Oklahoma. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Oklahoma was moored at Ford Island, Pearl Harbor. At 07:55, Japanese aircraft attacked. Multiple torpedoes hit Oklahoma's port side. The battleship rolled over and capsized in 12 minutes. 429 men died. Ensign England was working in the radio room when the ship capsized. He was trapped below decks and never made it out. His body was recovered after the war when Oklahoma was salvaged. He was 20 years old. The Navy named DE-635 in his honor. The commissioning ceremony on December 10, 1943, included England's mother, Mrs. H.B. England, as the ship's sponsor. Lieutenant Commander Walton Barclay Pendleton took command. Pendleton was a career Navy officer, 46 years old, born November 24, 1897. He had served on destroyers during World War I and spent the interwar years in various assignments, including Naval War College and staff positions. He was methodical, experienced, and careful. He understood destroyer operations and anti-submarine warfare doctrine. He was also smart enough to recognize that his executive officer was better at anti-submarine warfare than he was. From December 1943 through March 1944, USS England conducted shakedown training off the California coast. Williamson drilled the crew relentlessly. Hedgehog attacks, sonar searches, night operations, emergency maneuvers, over and over. He ran the crew through every scenario he could imagine: surface contacts at night, submerged contacts in rough seas, multiple contacts requiring rapid target switching, equipment casualties requiring backup procedures. The crew complained. The training was exhausting. Watch schedules were brutal. Sleep was limited. Every mistake resulted in additional drills. Williamson did not care. He told them submarines were smart and submarines were deadly, and the only way to survive was to be better trained than the enemy was skilled. The sonar crew trained the hardest. Soundman Second Class John Prock and Soundman Third Class Roger Bernhardt became highly proficient operators. Both men trained for hours each day on sonar detection. Williamson set up training scenarios. Friendly submarines would play enemy. The England would hunt them. The submarines used every evasive tactic in their playbook: sharp turns, rapid depth changes, knuckles created by reversing propellers to confuse the sonar return, speed changes to break contact. Prock and Bernhardt learned to identify subtle sounds: propeller cavitation, hull popping under pressure, ballast tank flooding. They learned to distinguish echoes from actual contacts. They learned to track fast-moving submarines through radical maneuvers. They learned to compensate for water conditions that affected sonar propagation: temperature layers, salinity gradients, underwater currents. By March 1944, they were among the best sonar operators in the Pacific Fleet. On March 12, 1944, USS England arrived at Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides. She joined Escort Division 40 under Commander Hamilton Haynes. Her primary mission was convoy escort. The work was tedious. Escort a convoy from Espiritu Santo to Guadalcanal. Turn around, escort another convoy back. Repeat, no combat, no submarines, just endless steaming back and forth across the same routes. The crews of the merchant ships in the convoys appreciated the protection, but for England's crew, the work felt anticlimactic after all their training. They had trained for intense anti-submarine combat. Instead, they were shepherding cargo ships across waters that had been relatively secure for months. The crew grew frustrated. All that preparation seemed squandered. Then, on May 18, 1944, the situation transformed. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific intercepted and deciphered a Japanese communication. Submarine I-16 was transporting supplies to Japanese forces at Buin on Bougainville's southern tip. The message detailed the submarine's route, speed, and timetable. American intelligence pinpointed I-16's location. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, stationed at Pearl Harbor, was tasked with intercepting and decoding Japanese naval communications. American cryptanalysts had cracked the Japanese naval code known as JN-25, used for operational messages between Japanese naval units. The intelligence from JN-25 intercepts provided American forces with significant advantages throughout the Pacific War. Commander Haynes received orders to intercept USS England, USS George, and USS Rabbi left Purvis Bay on the afternoon of May 18th. The three destroyer escorts formed a line abreast with 16,000 yards between ships, creating a sonar search area about 9 miles wide. They steamed northwest toward the intercept point, each ship running at 15 knots with active sonar continuously sweeping. On the morning of May 19, 1944, an American patrol aircraft spotted I-16 on the surface and radioed a contact report. The three destroyer escorts increased speed and headed for the reported position. At 1:35 in the afternoon, England's sonar operator detected a contact. Clear signature, submarine, range 2,000 yards, bearing 08050. Lieutenant Williamson took command. He instructed the engine room to reduce speed to 12 knots for precise maneuvering. The sonar team tracked the submarine's movements. I-16 was running submerged at about 8 knots, depth 150 feet. The submarine was trying to reach Bougainville on schedule and apparently had not detected the approaching destroyer escorts. Williamson maneuvered England into attack position. The ship approached the submarine from astern, maintaining sonar contact throughout the approach. He kept the ship's speed matched to the submarine's to maintain stable sonar conditions. At 1,000 yards, Williamson ordered the Hedgehog crew to prepare for attack. The crew loaded the spigots and checked the firing circuits. At 500 yards, he ordered, "Stand by." The submarine continued on course, unaware. At 300 yards, Williamson commanded, "Fire!" The Hedgehog launcher erupted. 24 projectiles arced through the afternoon air and plunged into the Pacific ahead of England. The pattern entered the water in an ellipse 200 yards ahead of the ship. The sonar operator maintained contact. The submarine was still there, still on course. 10 seconds passed. 15. 20. Nothing. Miss. The projectiles had landed in a pattern around the submarine, but none had hit. I-16 continued on course for another 5 seconds. Then the submarine turned hard to port. The commander had heard the splashes and realized he was under attack. Williamson ordered England to follow the turn. The sonar crew held contact. The submarine was now maneuvering evasively, trying to break contact. The Japanese commander was skilled. He knew American sonar capabilities and was using every technique available to exploit their weaknesses. For the next hour, USS England pursued I-16 through a series of maneuvers. The submarine would turn. England would follow. The submarine would change depth. The sonar would compensate. The submarine commander varied his tactics, never establishing a predictable pattern. Turn intervals changed. Depth changes were irregular. Speed adjustments kept Williamson guessing. Williamson made 4 more Hedgehog attacks, all missed. The submarine commander was skilled. He timed his turns to coincide with England's firing runs, throwing off the aim. Each time England reached firing position, the submarine would execute a hard turn or rapid depth change that moved it outside the Hedgehog pattern before the projectiles reached target depth. On the 5th attack run, Williamson decided to wait. Instead of firing as soon as England reached firing position, he tracked the submarine for an extra 30 seconds. He observed the pattern. The submarine was turning right every time England approached. The Japanese commander had fallen into a pattern without realizing it. Under stress, facing repeated attacks, he had defaulted to a preferred defensive maneuver. Right turns, always right turns. Williamson accounted for that. When England reached firing position, Williamson aimed the Hedgehog pattern 30° to the right of the submarine's current course. Then he fired. The projectiles splashed down. The sonar operator reported the submarine turning right exactly as predicted. 3 seconds later, explosions. 4 to 6 distinct detonations, then a massive underwater explosion. The Hedgehog hits had ruptured I-16's pressure hull. Seawater flooded in under enormous pressure. At 150 feet depth, the water pressure was 65 pounds per square inch. Through the hull breaches, water entered at tremendous velocity. The submarine's structural frames collapsed. The hull imploded. I-16 went down at 2:35 in the afternoon with all 107 men aboard. Lieutenant Commander Takuchi Yoshitaka, the boat's commanding officer, died with his crew. American intelligence had intercepted another Japanese message. 7 submarines from Submarine Squadron 7 were forming a picket line north of the Admiralty Islands. The line was designated Scouting Line NA. Its purpose was to detect American fleet movements toward the Palau Islands. The Japanese High Command expected an American offensive in the Central Pacific. The submarine picket line was intended to provide early warning of American carrier task force movements. Each submarine was assigned a specific patrol area along a line running roughly east to west. They were to remain on station, report any American ship movements, and attack targets of opportunity. The submarines were Row 104, Row 105, Row 106, Row 108, Row 109, Row 112, and Row 116. All were Row 100 class submarines, smaller than the I-class coastal defense boats, displacing 611 tons surfaced, 795 tons submerged. Length 199 feet 10 inches. Crew varied between 49 and 58 men, depending on configuration. Armed with 4 21-inch torpedo tubes and 1 3-inch deck gun. Maximum diving depth, 246 feet. Maximum surface speed, 14 knots. Submerged speed, 8 knots. Range 3,500 nautical miles at 12 knots surfaced. Not particularly fast or capable compared to larger Japanese submarines, but adequate for reconnaissance work. The 3 destroyer escorts increased speed to 20 knots and closed the range. USS George illuminated the contact with searchlights at 4,000 yards. The submarine was Row 106, commanded by Lieutenant Uda Kitai. Uda saw the searchlights and realized he had been caught on the surface. He ordered a crash dive. Row 106 bow went down. Water flooded the forward ballast tanks. The submarine dove at a steep angle, trying to reach a safe depth before the American ships could attack. The crew worked frantically to close hatches and secure equipment. A crash dive was a desperate maneuver that could cause equipment damage and put enormous stress on the hull, but it was the only option when caught on the surface by enemy warships. USS George fired a Hedgehog salvo at 045. The projectiles missed. Row 106 continued diving and began evasive maneuvers. At 0425, USS England gained sonar contact. Williamson took the con and maneuvered into attack position. Row 106 was now at 275 feet, near her maximum safe depth. She was turning hard, trying to break sonar contact. At this depth, the submarine was operating at the edge of her structural limits. The pressure hull was under enormous stress. Any additional damage could be catastrophic. Williamson tracked the turns. First Hedgehog attack at 0433. Miss Williamson repositioned. He analyzed the submarine's maneuver pattern. The Japanese commander was alternating between hard right and hard left turns every 40 seconds. Predictable once you saw the pattern. At 0501, Williamson fired the second Hedgehog salvo. This time, he aimed ahead of the submarine's turn. The projectiles splashed down. 3 seconds later, 3 explosions in rapid succession, then a massive underwater detonation. Row 106's pressure hull ruptured at 275 feet. The submarine imploded. All 49 men died instantly. At that depth, the hull collapse was catastrophic and immediate. At dawn, the destroyer escorts found debris and a large oil slick. 2 submarines in 3 days, but Scouting Line NA still had 5 more submarines. On May 23, 1944, an Allied patrol aircraft spotted Row 104 on the surface 250 nautical miles north-northwest of Kavieng. The aircraft radioed the position to the destroyer escorts. By sunset, the 3 ships had closed within radar range. At 06:04 on the morning of May 23rd, USS Rabai detected row 104 on radar, range 4 nautical miles. The submarine was on the surface running on diesels. The 3 destroyer escorts charged in at full speed. Row 104 detected them at 2 miles and crash dived. USS Rabai and USS George arrived first. Both ships made Hedgehog attacks over the next 2 hours, 8 attacks total, all missed. The submarine commander, Lieutenant Izubuchi Hisashi, was skilled and aggressive. He executed radical depth changes and course reversals that threw off the American aim. The Japanese noticed. On May 23, 1944, the commander of Submarine Squadron 7, Captain Kato Ryanowski, sent an urgent message to all submarines on Scouting Line NA. Enemy anti-submarine forces operating in your area. Multiple submarines lost. All boats execute relocation 30 miles westward immediately. The message revealed the severity of the situation. 3 submarines had been lost in rapid succession. The picket line had been compromised. Kato was attempting to preserve his remaining submarines by relocating them outside the area where the American ships were operating. American intelligence intercepted and decoded the message within hours. The new positions were plotted. The hunt continued. At Aero 120 on the morning of May 24, 1944, USS George detected row 116 on radar. Range 10,000 yards. The submarine was on the surface. The 3 destroyer escorts closed in. Row 116 crash dived at 4,000 yards. But this time, the submarine commander knew what was coming. He knew 3 submarines had already been sunk. He knew the Americans had a deadly forward-firing weapon. The radio messages from Submarine Squadron 7 headquarters had made that clear. Lieutenant Okabe Takeshi commanded row 116. He had 9 previous war patrols. He understood submarine operations and American anti-submarine tactics. He decided to fight back rather than simply evade. At Aero 150, USS England gained sonar contact. Williamson took the con and maneuvered for attack. Row 116 immediately began aggressive evasive maneuvers, not the standard turns and depth changes. Okabe was fishtailing, kicking the rudder back and forth to create erratic movement. He was also counterpinging, transmitting his own sonar pulses to confuse the American sonar operators. The counterping created multiple false echoes that cluttered the sonar display. John Prock sat at the sonar station and tried to maintain contact. The submarine's signature kept breaking up. The counterping created false echoes. The fishtailing made the contact appear to jump around. Prock had to filter through all of that to find the real submarine. He adjusted the sonar gain. He changed the sonar pulse rate. He used every technique Williamson had taught him during training. Williamson made the first attack run at 0205. Miss Okabe reversed course and dove deeper. Second attack run at 0210. Miss Okabe changed depth rapidly, confusing the firing solution. Third attack run at 0214. Williamson aimed carefully, tracked the submarine's movements, compensated for the evasive maneuvers. Fire. The Hedgehog projectiles arced out and splashed down. 3 to 5 explosions, not as many as the previous kills. The sonar operators heard breaking up noises, metal tearing, compartments flooding, but no massive explosion. Row 116 was severely damaged but still intact. She was sinking slowly, flooding from multiple compartments. The crew tried to surface, but the damage was too extensive. The bow planes were jammed. The ballast tanks would not blow. Water continued to flood into damaged compartments. Together, we ensure that the bravery and dedication of those who served are never forgotten. Their actions shape the course of history, and it's our duty to honor their legacy by remembering and sharing their stories.